per month if I check my facts right. Um, you know, Americans have had enough of this. And I'm sorry, I know you learned it from the President Biden. Free education, free food for 15 million illegals that came into this country. Um, you know, free housing. I'm sorry, that's not how this country was built. And you know, I admire all of you for the work that you do. Each one of you do work. And for those who keep identifying as, you know, demonizing work and demonizing those who have been successful, you never know the long hours that they put in, the long hours that they took to build a business, the long hours that they didn't get a paycheck. So you're hurting the very people who you could give hope to. And by demonizing this, Americans are just tired of it. You want to know somebody who's a definition of hard work? Right here. Came from nothing. Look at what she did. Many of you. And if you want to say rich, I think if you've got your health, you're pretty rich. If you've got your health, Jerry Conley would get it back. So I resent you saying that. And I really, it's a sad day that we've gotten to that point in this country when so many people are doing that. And
Are you asking me a question, sir?
no, ma'am.
Oh, I didn't think you would.
Filibustered long enough.
I
And
think you would actually ask me a question about work.
I did not ask you a question. I'm not asking you a question. What I'm saying is, it's my time, Ms. Moore. I didn't interrupt you. You went on for, I counted, you went on for 20 minutes, which is fine. And you are entertaining. I'll give you that. But
I'm just really smart.
Ms. Moore, it's my time. All I'm saying is that the day of demonizing work, the day of demonizing America is over with. And Americans, people got it right. And we're going to continue to have a great country. This bill, this big, beautiful bill will help this country out. It's got some things we got to work out, but it'll help this country. And the other thing I will tell you is the taxes are the people's money. Government is y'all's God. The taxes are the people's money. And to give it back to them, like Chairman Smith and Chairman Thompson and Tim, you know, that's the right thing to do. So we're going to right the wrong for the last 4 years that this country has been through a living hell with this past president. And thank God we got people who are willing to step up and go to work. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Mr. DeGoose, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, my friend from South Carolina talked a lot about work. Just for the record, we've been working for the last 8 hours here in the committee, and I could say the same for the chairwoman. I'm not so sure I could say the same about you. I think you snuck out for a little shut-eye for a few hours, so I'm not sure. There was a lot of talk about work, but I haven't seen you in a few hours, so welcome back. Anyway, I do want to take a minute in all seriousness, and I want to thank the chairwoman for taking a moment to center our conversation here, just to remember and honor our colleague, whom I know we all treasured, and he was a giant among giants in this institution. He was a ranking member of one of our committees. He was the president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, appointed by Madam Speaker Emerita. He was one of the most prolific legislators in the House. I don't know that there's a single member of the House during his tenure in this body that had more laws signed, or excuse me, more pieces of legislation signed into law by presidents of both parties. And more than anything else, he was a fighter and a friend. And so I just know that we're going to miss him. And I think that it's a big loss for the people of Fairfax and for the folks in the Commonwealth of Virginia and for this institution. I want to ask some questions. Thank you to the panel. You all have been, I think it's the longest panel. As you know, we started at 1 a.m. So we've been here for about 8 hours. I'm told the sun has risen and that it's morning outside, but we haven't, been outside the room yet. So we'll just have to take your word for it. And as I said to the panel that preceded yours, I have been, I think maybe I can speak for my colleagues on this side of the aisle, we have been on this collective journey to try to figure out why the speaker and Republican leadership decided to do this midnight, middle of the night, dead of night hearing on your reconciliation bill. And of course, we believe it's because this bill is indefensible and the Republican leadership did not want this bill debated out in the open. And I've tried to get answers from a variety of my different colleagues. One of my colleagues from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, offered an explanation more recently and essentially said, well, we did it in anticipation that there would be extensive debate by Democrats on this committee. Of course, there was only 4 of us on this committee. Mr. Guthrie, Chairman Guthrie, you haven't had a question in a while, so maybe I'll pose this to you. How long was your hearing in Energy and Commerce?
My hearing, first, my comments on Jerry. He was probably one of my dear friends here and was supposed to be honored this weekend in Dayton, Ohio with a NATO meeting. People don't really realize there's actually a NATO parliament and some of us are designated. And he was the president or speaker of the NATO parliament. So not only is Jerry beloved by all of us, he's beloved around the world. All of our NATO allies, every time he showed up at a meeting, Jerry, there's Jerry, there's Jerry. And they just, everybody adored him because he's just a adorable, wonderful person. And I'm going to miss him. And I'll be in Dayton this weekend and I'm sure a lot of us are going to shed a lot of tears for him. So send that. So the question, my hearing went for 26 and a half hours.
26 and a half hours. What time did you start it?
We started at 2:00 in the afternoon.
2:00 in the afternoon. So you weren't worried about the anticipatory debate. You knew that Ranking Member Pallone was going to come armed with extensive arguments and motions and amendments, but you decided to hold the hearing during the day, nonetheless,
We
right?
started during the day.
Started during the
We
day.
started during the day.
Yeah. Well, I wish that the speaker would have taken the same approach, but it's clear to me, and I think clear to the American public, that he did not want to have this debate happen during the day, and I can understand why, given what we've heard thus far. Chairman Smith, want to talk to you a bit about tax on tips. I heard your opening statement, and I think in some of the colloquies as far, I think suffice to say that you're very passionate about the no tax on tips. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I'm passionate because of the 4 million tipped employees. Just yesterday, in Washington, D.C., at the restaurant that I was at, my waiter asked me, "Are you going to be able to deliver this, Chairman?" So this affects real Americans. So very much passionate about it.
Totally. Why haven't you passed a standalone bill to get this done if it's so important?
Because there's a 60-vote rule over in the Senate.
The Senate just passed their bill yesterday.
Which is unconstitutional because all taxing
Of
has
course,
to originate from the
I'm well
House.
aware, but I guess I heard your first explanation was, well, there's 60 vote Senate barrier, so of course we could never get it passed in the Senate. But then Ted Cruz and Jackie Rosen, my understanding is they passed the bill by unanimous consent. Of course, as you said, there's the constitutionality issue. So I just don't understand why the Ways and Means Committee doesn't just mark up a bill. I think the sponsor of the bill is sitting right behind you. He's been in this hearing since like 3 a.m. Mr. Horsford, he's got a great bill on this. I think we could get this on the bill tomorrow. I think there'd be bipartisan strong support. Clearly, there's unanimous support in the Senate. I mean, if you're so passionate about it, why don't we get it done?
Mr. Neguse, you know that I have tried to work on tax policy, bipartisan tax policy the last Congress, that we got 82% of the vote to move it forward. Unfortunately, it died in the Senate. So sometimes bipartisan tax policy does not work. I believe the no tax on tips, the no tax on overtime, the tax relief for seniors are so urgent that I would not allow a tax bill to move forward unless it includes that in the House of Representatives. That's why I'm delivering for working class Americans.
Yeah, no, well, anyway, I guess I don't want to belabor the point here. You keep referencing the Senate. Unless I'm missing something, I thought the United States Senate passed on unanimous consent without any objections. Ted Cruz, Jackie Rosen, Democrat, Republican bill to not tax tips. And so I'm not really understanding the hurdle there. But anyway, you have a different worldview as to, I guess, the way to effectuate it. Can you give us a sense of where the state and local tax deduction piece is going to end? What are we going to be voting on later today?
What I'll say is that the $30,000 deduction that we passed out of the Ways and Means Committee, capping it at people who make less than $400,000, the Ways and Means Committee felt like that was a reasonable compromise that would help provide necessary tax relief And that's what the language is right now.
Okay, but I mean, you're the chairman of the committee. We're supposed to be voting on this bill in a few hours, is what I understand. There's rumors of a manager's amendment or maybe a secondary manager's amendment, or they'll come up with some other way to describe a third manager's amendment. I'm not sure. There's a lot of reporting on it. Who would I go to talk to figure out what we're voting on later today as it relates to the state and local tax deduction?
I would say that's going to be the discussion of the Rules Committee when the manager's amendment is offered and debated. So you'll probably know before most members of Congress.
I hope so. We've been here for 8 hours and we've yet to get any indication of that. And I'm not, I mean, this would apply to Chairman Guthrie as well. I mean, we've heard a lot about the IRA phase outs. I don't know if you have anything to share with the group about where that stands?
That would be Ways and
Well,
Means Committee jurisdiction, not Guthrie's. ENC doesn't have a lot of committee of jurisdiction.
Sure. Oh,
but-
well, I'll let you two battle that out, but
But from my understanding, the Ways and Means Committee, I have not seen any changes to the phase outs or what we've had in regards to
so
the IRA.
what we have in the rules mark now, you believe is what we'll be voting on this evening or
That's
whenever.
what I'm here testifying in regards to.
Okay, well, that's a different answer, but I can appreciate your position. I guess my point here, and I know I was hoping to ask Mr. Roy this question because I hadn't seen him the last 8 hours, but he appeared, well, yeah, apparently he's negotiating it. So maybe he can come in and he can give us some indication as to the answers on both of those fronts. Oh, I see. I guess Chip Roy's announced I'm a no, but I don't know that makes, anyway, we'll hear from him directly. Some questions for you, Chairman Thompson, with respect to the agriculture mark. Help me understand, and maybe Ranking Member Craig can help me understand this as well. You all have sunsetted the exemption for, well, no, sorry. You've included an exemption for veterans within what you've determined to be the
Within
able-bodied
SNAP.
requirements in
Yeah,
SNAP.
Veterans, homeless, and young people that age out of foster care up to age 24.
So veterans, homeless, and then what was the third?
Foster youth.
Foster youth.
Yeah.
But you've sunset that exemption in 2030. That exemption only lasts through 2030, correct?
Oh, that's correct, because those were actually put in place of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. That's where those three
Sure.
provisions were added. And I actually believe that,
Here, let me ask you,
oh.
I guess the question I'm asking is, why not eliminate that sunset? Why, if the-
well, my
it's-
question back to you is, why would you not want those individuals to have access to greater opportunity, which only comes through being eligible under the SNAP title and the nutrition benefits, for the career and technical education, SNAP employment and career and technical education. We, of the Farm Bill.
Why are you
we put
exempting them
about
if that's the
$1.1
case?
trillion is what we put into the nutrition title. And a big part of that
Sure.
is the investment in greater opportunity through those educational benefits.
Okay, let me take a step back so I can just understand that. I guess what I'm trying to understand is the rationale for the exemption. You've exempted veterans, homeless youth, foster youth from these requirements until 2030. So well, hold on, let me finish. You've clearly decided that it's important to proceed with those exemptions until 2030. Otherwise, you would have said, we're just going to end the exemption now. So you believe it's important to do for the next few years. Why have you decided not to extend it further? Why is 2030 the year that you've decided that veterans should no longer be
That's
able to
when-
be exempted from these
That was a
requirements?
part of what, well, quite frankly, my negotiations on that with the Fiscal Responsibility Act were with President Biden. And that was the.
Sure, but you're not locked into
and that
that
was the
now.
language
You
that
all
put
have
into it.
abandoned most of the fiscal
Well,
responsibility.
even
Act,
even
agreements.
that was a great negotiations. We both sides got some good provisions, but at the same time, even back then, I felt that it really was disrespectful to veterans, to well, we'll just talk, you let off with veterans, to, you know, to not have an opportunity to benefit from the investments that are there under this nutrition title for SNAP employment and career and technical education.
If you feel that way, why keep it? I don't understand. I guess you're saying we have this exemption. It's important for foster youth and for the homeless and for veterans, but also we believe that we shouldn't have this exemption. And so that's why we're comfortable with it ending in
Well,
2030.
usually taking somebody off a cliff immediately is a really bad idea. We don't really do that with this bill. Even with the state share, we provide.
I agree with you
fiscal
about
year
describing it as a
2028
cliff and
be
not an
able to get
opportunity.
that.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
exactly what my sort of point is,
So
right?
we look closely at poverty cliffs and, you know, and I think taking folks off of that, that 2030 expiration really will serve the veterans population particularly. And I also think that the youth coming off out of
Sure.
foster care.
How much
you
money
know.
do you think it would cost? Your team may have a better sense of this than I would, to extend that out to 2031 or to 2032. Do you all know what it costs per year for that exemption to have continued?
I'm not sure the CBO is provided for. Yeah, we don't.
I mean, are we talking
Yeah.
tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars?
Well, we'd have to look back, y'all would have to look back at the Fiscal Responsibility Act to see what the score was
Okay.
on that.
Here's why I ask. To me, it seems like really what we're getting at, right, is a question of priorities, resources, and values. And it would not take, I don't believe, a lot of resources, a lot of investment to be able to avoid that cliff hitting these veterans and these foster youth in 2030,
But.
right? And let me give you an example, right? There's a simple way. Are you familiar with the tax on silencers? You're familiar with that
I am,
provision of tax? And you're aware that this bill repeals that tax.
that's correct.
All right. And that tax, do you know how much that's going to generate in terms of revenue over 10 years?
I don't, it wasn't in my
It's one-
jurisdiction, but.
No, I understand. Let me tell you.
As
It's
a former
1.4.
healthcare
Let me finish.
professional,
You said you don't know, so let me
these
tell you.
suppressors
I hear you.
are a healthcare measure. in terms
I
of
understand. I
hearing
hear you.
protection.
So let me just explain it to you. Over 10 years, the Joint Committee on Taxation estimates that this particular repeal generate $1.4 billion. Think about that. Hold
Well,
on. I'm not asking you a question, Mr. Chairman. 1.4.
Well, you did ask me a
I'm not
question
asking you a
originally
question
about
now. I'll give you
veterans.
an opportunity
And
in a
what
moment to
question I
answer the
have for you,
question.
what do you have against
Mr.
veterans
Chairman,
being-
I will give you
having
an
an
opportunity to
opportunity
finish.
to
I'm
climb
not
a-
asking you a
run a little
question.
higher in the ladder of
Mr. Chairman, I'm
opportunity?
not asking you a question. I
You're
will,
really
I'll
good at
redirect
that.
it to the ranking member since I'm not asking you this
Right.
question.
Just
Ranking
remember,
member,
it is the member of the committee's time, and
thank you, Mr.
so
Chairman.
we
So
can't have the
I will simply say this.
back and forth.
And I'll address this towards the ranking member. $1.4 billion that will be generated by virtue of this repeal of the silencer tax. This is a tax that has been on the books since the mid-1930s, 100 years. That's during Republican administrations, Democratic administrations. I don't remember Republicans or President Trump, for that matter, trying to repeal this tax in 2017 when you all were pursuing this the first time around. And yet you've decided on this course to repeal this particular tax that would generate $1.4 billion in revenue. Just imagine, Ranking Member Craig, what you could do with that $1.4 billion to address the cliffs that the chairman of the Agriculture Committee had described with respect to veterans and foster youth. The poverty cliff, I think, was the phrase that he used, that they will face under this bill in 4.5 years. Ranking Member, I'm happy to give you an opportunity.
Well, we could spend, excuse me, we wouldn't have to cut, I suppose, or Republicans wouldn't have to cut food out of the mouths of hungry children, veterans, and our nation's seniors. What's happening in this committee is egregious. You just think about the revenue savings that you're cutting from a title of the Farm Bill. And I know I keep saying that, but I know my Republican colleagues across the aisle know that the nutrition title is part of the Farm Bill. And they know that these cuts $313 billion to a title of the Farm Bill outside of a 12 title, 5-year process is putting a Farm Bill in jeopardy. And my colleagues are coming after food. We talk about work. I wish Mr. Norman was still here. Nobody here is arguing
He's
against
done working.
work.
He left.
He left again. He's done working apparently. Mr. Norman said, what do you get? Are you kidding me? We already have work requirements in SNAP. What we're doing is we're adding work requirements to single parents of 7-year-olds. Who thinks that's a good idea? It's egregious. And you talk about childcare costs in this country, it's egregious where we are. And, you know, Mr. Norman, and I could give you examples for every single one of your districts, but I'm going to use his just because I had it open here. We're talking about 11% of the state population in South Carolina that he's going to cut. We're talking about $321 million a year to the taxpayers of South Carolina in additional cost shifts. We're talking about $1 billion a year to the state of Pennsylvania. These are real dollars if we move forward with these. And so I have no idea why we think it's a good idea to repeal a tax on silencers when we are going to feed fewer children in our country as a result of this. It's a moral damn failure is what it is, Congressman.
I couldn't say it any better. Ranking Member Craig, I think you articulated it well. And I guess it is just full circle in some ways, given that this was the last panel that we're going to hear from. But it makes a lot more sense in retrospect now why Republicans decided to proceed with this particular hearing in the dead of night. Because I think when you begin to see the full picture, it's only when you have the chair of the Ways and Means Committee to talk about the various priorities they are pursuing, repeals of taxes on silencers by way of example, and hear from the Agriculture Committee about the priorities they are pursuing, massive cuts to the social safety net, that you begin to understand the full picture holistically that is reflected in this bill. And I think that is ultimately what House Republicans did not want the American people to hear or to see. Regrettably for them, we're going to have an opportunity throughout the rest of today and when this bill invariably gets to the floor to continue exposing it to the American public. And I think the more the American public learn about this bill, the less they're going to like it. So with that, I will yield back, Mr. Chairman, I think.
Gentleman yields back and now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, for his time of question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot said about a lot of different numbers here. But I want to come to you, Mr. Smith. I mean, my understanding is that the current tax rate for 2025, the top rate is 37%, and that is going to apply to people that are making, they're filing jointly, married filing jointly, $731,200, somewhere right there. And that if this bill passes, that tax rate at 37%, it's still going to be 37% for 2026. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So all of this talk about tax cuts for billionaires, what the accurate statement would be is we are not allowing tax rates to go up.
We're keeping the same current tax policy with all the rates because every individual rate, if Congress does not act by the end of this year, goes up, the lowest tax rate and the highest tax rate. And what this bill does, it just makes permanent current tax rates.
Okay. I'm going to come to you, Chairman Thompson, because I want to talk about SNAP and the work requirements and other things. And I want to say this. We met on 2 separate occasions, and there was an accusation made that you shut down debate. My recollection is that we met the first day, and then we came back and we met a second day, and we went from 10 to 10. And I read the various amendments that Democrats kept submitting, and it was basically the exact same amendment. Like they plagiarized each other with the amendments that they were submitting. And so finally, we went ahead and we had the votes on the amendments. And is that your recollection?
Well, that plus the fact that none of the amendments were submitted within the within the deadline, it's within the rules package that was unanimously adopted. And and there was quite a bit of repetition, absolutely.
Okay. So what percentage of Farm Bill spending currently goes to SNAP benefits?
Approximately 82%.
82% of Farm Bill spending now goes to SNAP benefits.
That's correct.
And while the Democrats say they want to work in a bipartisan manner to pass a farm bill, their demand is that 82% of Farm Bill spending must go to SNAP benefits, which means that production agriculture is going to end up with less than 10%. Now, if you're not taking care of production agriculture, then you're not taking care of the food supply for anybody in this country, whether they're on SNAP or whether they are at the highest tax bracket in the country. Is that fair to say?
That is more than fair to say. If farmers fail, we have food insecurity. And no matter what the programs look like, what the rules are, what the regulations are, we have food insecurity, which quite frankly is national insecurity.
So only 4 Democrats on the House Agriculture Committee voted for the Farm Bill in committee last year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Ms. Craig, I don't think you were one of them, were you?
No, sir, I didn't, but I noticed
okay, thank
Republicans
you.
didn't bring it to the floor because you didn't have the
Yeah.
votes.
Well, because of the demand that 80+% of it go to SNAP benefits.
45
was-
million Americans versus 1 million Americans. That's the split in the Farm Bill between those two programs.
Explain those numbers, please.
SNAP covers 45 million Americans. The farm program covers about 1 million Americans.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
the
And those
split.
1 million Americans provide 100% of the food
And-
for the American citizens.
And your
This
cuts
is
to
my time and
SNAP.
you can wait.
This
I'm going
is
to come
the
to you
gentleman's time.
Okay,
because
I'm
I want
ready.
to talk
I'm
about
ready.
some of the votes you've
Yeah.
cast on the Inflation Reduction Act and the
Ready.
American Rescue Plan.
Do
But
it.
without the 1 million farmers in this country, there's no food for the people who have SNAP benefits to buy. That's all there is to it. So, but I appreciate you coming clean on that.
I'm not coming clean. It's a fact.
Sure you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
a
talking,
fact.
yeah, you made it clear. You don't
That's
care
why
about
the
the 1 million.
coalition exists, because the nutrition and the farm
Ah,
programs
is the-
exist
no, is the
It's the
together.
gentleman's time. He asked the
You
question.
expose
Answer.
yourself on not caring about the 1 million farmers, and that's fine.
Oh,
All right. GT. Federal law right now, today, and this is a Biden administration proposal I have. And I would remind everybody that's watching, when they had the House, the Senate, and the White House, they passed both the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act without a single Republican vote. So that they could have changed any of this they wanted to, and they chose not to.
That's correct.
Federal law limits the amount of time a time-limited, which is an able-bodied working age adult without dependents, participant, commonly referred to as an able-bodied adult without dependents, can participate in SNAP to any 3 countable months in a 36-month period, unless a person meets the work requirements. That's the current law.
That's correct. And the work requirement, we've had the work requirements since 1970s.
thank you for coming clean on that.
That's right. And when Bill Clinton signed the welfare to work requirements, the poverty rates declined more than at any other point in the country. Is that correct? that correct?
That's correct.
Do you dispute that, Ms. Craig?
I don't have that data in front of me, and I don't think GT does either.
Oh, come on. Democrats have routinely taken credit for what Bill Clinton did in the welfare to work. Just factually speaking, it was a good piece of legislation. And people went back to work and poverty rates declined. All right. So what we have done in the bill is effectively take the 2 separate work exemptions. One is a general work requirement exemption, and we have made them match with the able-bodied working age adult exemptions. Is that correct?
That's correct. Reducing hopefully going forward, then reducing the confusion and the complexity for the participants to be able to gain better access.
Gain better access to what?
To SNAP.
This is
Look,
this is the gentleman's time.
Work Work is good. Work is good,
Work is great.
you know, and without the 1 million American farmers, nobody in this country has food to eat. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Ms. Ledger Fernandez for her time of questioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think it's really important that we do not mischaracterize what our witnesses have said. And there was a gross mischaracterization as to whether the ranking member supports our farmers. I know the ranking member supports our farmers because indeed, if you just talk about SNAP, 1.5 times the benefit
That's-
goes to the farmers. So when we're talking about protecting SNAP, we're also talking about protecting the farmer. Is that right, ranking member?
Well, if you cut SNAP by $300 billion, you're actually taking $30 billion right out of the farm income. And that is absolutely true, sir. And, what's interesting
I'm sorry, I
is-
have not yielded time, Mr.
Oh,
Scott.
What's interesting, Ms. Ledger Fernandez, is that my colleague across the room here, 23% of folks, all households in his congressional district have access to the SNAP program in our country, one of the highest rates in this room. And he is seeking to cut that program by $300 billion. And back to work, work is good. And matching the program, you're talking about sending single mothers and fathers to work almost 20 hours a week when their child turns 7 years old. If we were here to talk about work, we would be talking about trade skills, technical programs. We would be talking about ways in which to help people get out of low wage jobs in our country. We'd be talking about raising the minimum wage in our country to help them get out of poverty. But we're not. We're here talking about cutting their health care, cutting their SNAP benefits. We're talking about items that are going to absolutely decimate rural communities like Mr. Scott's across the room here. And it's just stunning to me.
Me too.
Mr.
One-
Chairman, since
1
my name was
million-
called, I do expect a chance to respond to that.
Actually,
is that
the
the
proper,
rule?
the rule is
Yeah.
that you can mention the gentleman from Georgia, but you're not to mention him by name in debate. And so if you would stick to just saying the gentleman or my colleague is fine. And if you would stick to that, but that's the way we're supposed to operate.
Would you
Alright.
like to restate it to say the gentleman?
Yes, the gentleman from Georgia has one of the highest rates of SNAP households in the country. And he is promoting decimating this program. And look, there's lots of things in here that should be in a farm bill. Lots of elements. You cut the nutrition title, you plus up the farm programs in reconciliation in a partisan process. That's what's happening here. We should be sitting down and doing a farm bill. And honestly, I know my chairman sitting next to me does not want to cut SNAP by $300 billion, and many of the colleagues on our committee did not want to do it because they didn't show up for debate. They didn't want to be on the record talking about this because they know it's incredibly unpopular for the American people. We have traditionally been able to get a bipartisan farm bill from the Nutrition Coalition and the Farm Coalition. Of course, these coalitions are together, but we're destroying that here today, folks, and it has long-term consequences for us. I just hope you all know what you're doing on a partisan basis has long-term consequences.
Thank you. And I noticed that the education chair and ranking member, perked up and they said, wait a minute, we're going to talk about education. We came here to talk about education. And we're actually cutting education by also hundreds and billions of dollars. So we're not going to get there. But I wanted to yield some time to my ranking member, Mr. McGovern,
Yeah,
the gentleman from.
yeah, you could, I won't be offended if you refer to me by my name, but you know what? Enough of this BS, because that's what it is. I mean, nobody here is saying that there isn't dignity in work. What we're saying is that life is complicated and one glove doesn't always fit all. And what we're also saying, and because I believe this is true, that this is a backdoor attempt to force people off the benefit. So you can take that money and pay for tax cuts for billionaires. That's what it's about. And I will also tell the gentleman that over the years, hunger has gotten worse in this country. The only time it didn't, believe it or not, was during the pandemic. And that is when we increased the SNAP benefit and when we increased other nutritional programs to help people get through that difficult time, we actually saw hunger go down, food insecurity go down. And then when some of those programs sunsetted, hunger started to rise up again. So hunger is a political condition, my friends. I mean, we have the money, we have the resources, we know what to do to end it. What we lack is the political will. And again, tax cuts for billionaires paid for by savings in SNAP is not going to end hunger and food insecurity in this country. And again, I mean, the idea that we can't come together and say that ending hunger and food insecurity is a priority, that somehow it's okay to demonize people who are struggling. I mean, I find that, appalling, quite frankly. I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I yield back.
Thank you, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern. You know what? Hunger is also a moral issue. It is a moral issue. And that's why 31 religious organizations have written to the chairs of all of the appropriate committees, asking them to not pass these cuts. And they point out that, so actually, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter sent to all the chairs of the committee from 31 religious organizations across the United States.
Without objection.
In the letter, this is why it's a moral issue. And they say it out loud. They say, they wrote it down, it is an abdication of the government's moral responsibility when the government seeks to reduce its investment in programs for the poor. Complacency can become greed and selfishness when the funds saved from the Medicaid and SNAP programs are used to ultimately widen the gap between rich and poor. Budgets are moral documents that outline a nation's priority. And I was at some of the members on here because I know that they believe deeply in the moral obligations. They know the teachings that ask us to feed the hungry, to take care of the poor. That is the essence of Jesus's teaching about love. It is the essence of almost every religion. Actually, it's the essence of everyone I know. And I think that that is a key failing of what we are doing here. But I want to move on for a moment because I know we've given a lot of attention to ag, and I might come back there. But, Ranking Member Pallone, many of the children that we're talking about might be both receiving SNAP benefits and receiving Medicaid, right? And is that right? Many of the children, because this is what we're talking, and they are often working poor. Their families are working. We heard the Ranking Member Craig and so many stories. We have people, congressmen and congresswomen here who've shared their stories about how their parents worked and received SNAP, and that's how they got ahead. But isn't that the case that we have many children who rely on both SNAP and Medicaid?
It's absolutely the case, and I don't know how much you wanted me to expand on it, but I want to say really two things in response. First of all, my colleagues and my chairman during the markup repeatedly said, and Mr. Norman said, work, work, work. But the fact of the matter is that these people are working, right? The people that are getting SNAP, the people that are getting Medicaid, they're working, right? And it's the paperwork, it's the red tape that the Republicans are putting in place in this bill that is kicking people off. And I'm not suggesting that anybody's doing it intentionally, believe me. And I maybe shouldn't say this, but I'm going to, Mr. McGovern he mentioned Marie Antoinette, right? And I was, for some reason, I guess it had nothing to do, 11 o'clock at night, a couple of nights ago, there was a movie on about Marie Antoinette, right? And she said to her husband, the King Louis, she said, I don't know why everybody out there hates us so much. You know, I care about the poor. But the problem is that at the time they were, you know, all the money was going to the nobility and nothing was going to the average person, right? And so then one of her advisors says, well, Madam Queen, whatever, you realize that the people have no bread, right? And she says, well, let them eat cake, right? I mean, it's not that anybody here on the Republican side, you know, doesn't have moral values. They just don't understand. They just don't understand what's going on out there, right? And so they say, well, we're going to have work requirements. But then if you look at the states that had these work requirements, like Arkansas or Georgia, we find that almost everybody who was eligible for Medicaid, right, was working. And the problem was they didn't know that they had to fill out the papers. It was too onerous to fill out the paper. I just wanted to give you one story because I had it here. In Arkansas, which was one of the 2 states, but they only had it for a few months because they realized that it was kicking people off. And they said in the few months that the state had its work reporting requirements in effect, 18,000 people lost coverage. That's 1 in 4 people who were eligible for Medicaid. But research tells us that more than 95% of those people were meeting the requirements, but they were kicked off because they didn't even know that they had to meet the requirements. Even when they do, it's impossible to navigate. And they have one person here, Arkansas, attempting to document her work hours, shared that my mom said I need to go online and do this, and that I was on the phone with a lady trying to, and she said I needed to do something with my hours. Well, I was on the phone with the lady for like an hour. Then she sent me to someone else. Then she sent me to someone else. So I just gave up trying to report my hours worked, and she lost her Medicaid. In Georgia, there were like 300,000 to 400,000 people that were eligible. The state admitted they were eligible, but only about 7,000 ended up with coverage. That's the one state that still has it. Not because they weren't eligible, but because they couldn't go through the red tape. And you know, I know, I'm not suggesting that anybody on the Republican side is intentionally doing this, but this is the reality. And this is what the CBO says is why all these people, millions of people under this bill are going to lose their Medicaid because of this red tape. It's that simple.
Yeah, it's going to vary. And I'm glad you mentioned the Arkansas example because indeed 18,000 people, right? In New Mexico, you have to fill out, this is what you fill out in New Mexico, right? It's not like people aren't working or that they aren't filling out a lot of paperwork. This is before this bill. And it asks all kinds of stuff. Your immigration status, what you're doing, where you're working. They are filling out too much paperwork as it is. And for a party that's always complaining about paperwork, they're going to just put more on there because that's not the purpose. The purpose isn't to get people back to work. It's to kick people off of Medicaid. It's to not recognize the hard work of those that already are. Because as you put it, 92%? 92% of adults under 65 on Medicaid are already working or can't work because they're caregiving, illness, they're going to school. So don't tell us about work because we come from families that work. We come from families that get our hands dirty. We know what it looks like and what it feels like. And these are the people that we are working to protect. And I am very concerned about what they're going to do to indeed the people. When I go to my rural areas, when I went, to the dairy farms and talked to the people in my rural areas, and they said, we are the people who get our hands dirty because I represent a large rural district. They're going to get slammed, aren't they, Ranking Member Pallone? Because rural hospitals are going to go under. Madam Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record. Medicaid cuts would threaten rural hospitals. And this is, Madam Chair? Yeah.
You finish the.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to go into it because I think it's really important that Americans who now have woken up and had their second cup of coffee, that they actually look at what's happening here. because it is really scary. In Pennsylvania, 12 rural hospitals, 24% are at immediate risk of closure from what you're doing here. In Michigan, 9 rural hospitals. Oklahoma, 24 rural hospitals. You know, several in my community as well. But if you are representing a rural area or a rural state, your rural hospitals are going to close. Because this is the thing. We're going to kick you off of Medicaid, and then we're not going to let you get onto the Affordable Care Act with the subsidies. Is that right? And so they're going to show up at the hospitals and not have any care, right?
Absolutely. And I want to explain why, because I'm not sure everyone knows that the CBO estimated that those 8.6 million under the bill that, or at least most of them, that would lose Medicaid because of the red tape, would immediately, or at least they would try to move over to the ACA and get a subsidized insurance policy under the ACA. But because of that, all of the savings that were going to be, go to the rich and the corporate interests under this bill would have been lost. Because if those people moved over to the ACA and got a subsidized insurance policy, the government would have to pay for their subsidy, and therefore there was no savings or very, very little savings under the bill. And so then they put in the work, they put in the prohibition that if you were denied Medicaid, you could not go to the ACA and get a subsidy. You had to pay full freight, which of course none of them could afford to pay, right? So that is strictly to make sure that there's money saved to pay for the tax cuts for the wealthy and the corporate interests. That's the only reason that's in there. Again, it's not because, I think the GOP hate the poor. It's because they have to come up with this money to pay for the tax cut for the rich and the corporate interests. That's the bottom line.
So I think it's also, once again, budgets reflect your values. Chairman Moore, I was wondering if you happen to have the bill, if you would mind reading the title of section 11106 on page 901, line 20 in the Rules Committee print. Oh, sorry, Chairman Guthrie.
I was about to say, you had made me a chairman. I was just going to say, I
I didn't hear your
accept.
question then. I'm sorry. I didn't hear. I didn't know it was directed at me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
What, you ask again?
Okay, if you'd go to page 901.
Mhm.
Page 901, line 20 of the bill. Do you have the bill in
I
front of you?
don't have the bill in front of me, but
Yeah,
read the-
I'll pass this down to you.
okay.
Just read that one line. Line 20.
I don't think, that's not in my jurisdiction. I'm sorry. That's why I didn't know
Okay,
about it.
we can pass it. I think that was Ways and Means, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it is.
Chairman Smith, sorry.
Okay, so what are you asking?
Would you please, so that the American public knows what this bill does, one of the little things that it does, would you please read page 901, line 20?
I think it'd be better if you read it.
Oh, he doesn't want to read it.
I've,
I'll read it.
I know the
well, actually,
legislation, but I'm not
Ranking
gonna be
Member
part
Moore,
of your little
Ranking Member
show
Moore.
here, so you can
Ranking
read
Member,
it.
it was a question if you would read it, so I'll ask Ranking
said
Member
yes.
Moore to read the text. This is in their bill. They don't want to read a line from their own bill. Ranking Member.
I don't want to read the bill for you.
I'll
So,
help you out.
I am testifying about this legislation. I'm not going to read the bill to you.
Okay, I am,
Miss
this is amazing.
Miss
You are
Lager
on-
Fernandez,
re-
shall I pass this back or shall I
No,
read
no,
it for
why don't
you?
you just read it?
I am a member of this committee. I am the
Line 20.
ranking vice chair of the committee. It says section 111106, repeal of excise tax on indoor tanning services.
So they're going to repeal, they're repealing an excise tax on tanning beds. They're repealing a tax on silencers. At the same, so they're going to, okay, so if you have a tanning bed, you get a little bit of a tax break. And if you need a hospital bed in rural America, I'm sorry, you're out of luck. Right? And I don't know where this particular provision came from. We do know that there are certain elected officials who appear to have a certain orange hue about them, that maybe they want to make sure that tanning beds get a little bit of special credit. But really, we are prioritizing tanning beds over hospital beds in rural America. So, I do want to talk a little bit about the tax credit, the child tax credit. Because one of the things that is sad about the child tax credit, I agree that it should have gone on for longer. We fought, Rosa DeLauro has been fighting for that expanded child tax credit for almost her entire time here, and she is joined by so many of us on the Democratic caucus, I think all of us. Now, sadly, it didn't get extended, but it didn't get extended because we could not get the Republican votes to extend it in the way it was. And right now, what they have in this bill would actually deny the full value of the child tax credit to 17 million children because their families don't make enough money to qualify for it. Now, I don't know if the chair wants to answer any more questions, but maybe I'll just ask Ranking Member Moore, is that what's going to happen with the child tax credit? Is the families who need it the most won't get it? Well, does the child tax credit extend to all the families
So what
of
this
America?
legislation does, of the 17 million children that you're talking about, they're going to make sure that their refundability is $1,700. At the end of this year, it drops to $1,000. So we're making sure that they are staying whole of where they are currently. If this bill does not pass, those 17 million children will only have $1,000 child tax credit instead of a $1,700.
But there is a discrepancy. Representative Moore.
Thank you so much. And Chairman Smith knows that that this is very important to me. This is the reason that I came to Congress. And so while I appreciate the fact that this committee has finally recognized that as an OECD country, we need to provide some kind of child supplement to children. I mean, everybody else has figured that out before we did. And while people want to give women $5,000 to have babies, I just think it's a lot more practical to take care of the children that we already have. I guess the thing that and we're going to get to talking about work requirements again, but as people have pointed out, about 96, 97% of people who are under the age of 65 and that receive any of these benefits they work. And if they're not working, they've worked the year before, they received any of these benefits. They worked a year after they've gotten it. And the 6 or 7% of people who don't work, as Mr. McDermott has pointed out, they have Mr. McGovern, have very complicated lives. They're taking care of elders, they're taking care of children. So if a woman finds herself in a situation, for example, where she, for whatever reason, cannot work, there are 17 million children who will get zero. And these are the poorest kids that there are. And they need support. It's, a child supplement is supposed to recognize that child rearing is expensive. The kids don't earn money particularly, but they need their Cub Scout uniform. They have sports equipment. They can't participate. I can remember growing up when I couldn't go on a field trip because I didn't have $5 for the bus fare. And we're going to leave them out. And, because of this work requirement, the poorest children, 17 million of them, who have no control over whether or not employers will provide their parents with work, parents who perhaps don't have a high school diploma, You know, I know people who wouldn't hire people because all their teeth were rotten. And that wasn't a good look for working in the restaurant. And these are children, the most needy will not receive any money whatsoever. And you have to earn at least $2,500. Is that right, Mr. Chairman? To get the lowest amount of the tax credit. So someone, you know, the mayor of Milwaukee, you know, he's got 3 beautiful children. He'll get the maximum tax credit, and the kids who live down the street will get nothing.
It's that disparity. You know, there are so many bad things in this bill that we really need another 3 or 4 days. The Inflation Reduction Act, what they are doing to clean energy, what they are doing in so many different areas, condemning the United States to be so far behind, condemning us to be, you know, second to China on renewable energy in so many different ways. But, you know, I think that we will just continue to talk about these other things because it's really important. But with that, I want to yield just a really quick few seconds to my colleague.
Yes, I just wanted to seek unanimous consent on an article. My colleague mentioned the issues with respect to rural hospitals, but there's a Philadelphia Inquirer article from May 19th entitled "Pennsylvania Hospitals Like Crozer-Chester with a lot of Medicaid patients keep closing. Budget cuts would speed up that trend." And it discusses how half of our adult hospitals in southeastern Pennsylvania have closed due to lack of adequate Medicaid funding.
Without objection.
Thank you.
And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Houchin, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam
Comment.
Chair. I appreciate the panel being here and for long hours and testifying. I do want to offer to my chairman of Energy and Commerce, Chairman Guthrie, to just touch on anything that you would like to cover out of the many accusations that have been leveled about the bill. But my one question to you, since high school diplomas were mentioned, if somebody doesn't have a high school diploma, then they might not be able to get a job per the work requirements that we have in the bill. Doesn't participating in some sort of education program count toward those requirements?
If you're working towards a GED program, that would count towards your work requirement.
So if you want to go through, I'll yield time to you to cover
Well, thanks a
the
lot.
many accusations.
Thanks a lot. And I come from a product of hard work too. My whole life growing up, my childhood up through high school, my dad worked in a Ford foundry. That's pretty hard in Alabama. So that's pretty hard work when you're in the heat of the summer. So I come from that as well. And if you look at, they talked about the coverage loss. I always say, look at ineligible, illegal, and able. So if you look at the coverage loss that comes from the Medicaid requirement, it's people that aren't eligible to participate in the Medicaid program by the rules set up by people who voted for the Medicaid program. The other are the people that are not here in a legal presence. And the other is the able-bodied. And when we talk about able-bodied, well, one, I know that we talked about the maternal health program. That was actually bipartisan. I think Doc Burgess was really engaged in doing that. It was extended for a year. And that, if it's anywhere in the bill, I want somebody to point that out because it's absolutely, it's not in the bill that's affected. But the work requirement does not apply to you if you're a pregnant woman, if you're under 19 or over the age of 64, if you're a tribe member, if you're a parent, guardian, caretaker, relative of a disabled individual, or have a dependent child. Veterans with a disability rated as total, individuals who are medically frail, which includes but is not limited to people with the following conditions: blind, disabled, substance use disorder, disabling mental disorder, physical intellectual development disability, serious or complex medical condition, or other conditions identified by the state or approved by the secretary, or you're for compliance with TANF or SNAP, which SNAP's had them, we argue, since the 1970s. So we think we can do this. People have brought up Georgia and Arkansas. Those were problems. People were working and could not get Medicaid. And that is absolutely not what we want. That's why we took great pains to make sure we simplify the reporting requirements. People have due process rights. We want people to have Medicaid, but if they're not working or able to work, but we don't want to use the work requirement to deprive people of Medicaid. So we feel that is there. The other number because they throw up 13 million. There's like over 5 million, but that comes from an expiring provision in the Inflation Reduction Act. And it was brought up by my friend from Wisconsin and others that, well, why don't we make all these other things permanent? That wasn't made permanent. It's expiring. And because it's expiring, that's where the 5 million comes from. So there were decisions that I don't know why y'all decided in the IRA to spend $32 billion or $27 billion on the Green Energy Fund when you could have made this last longer. And then my friend from Massachusetts talked about, well, this is for the well-connected. We had a hearing yesterday where there's a nonprofit that was started by a well-connected individual, had $100 in the checking account of the non-progressive forward and got a $2 billion grant, which the CEO's salary of that is over $800,000. So she's getting paid 5 times a member of Congress to implement a grant appropriated by Congress. And if that's not well connected and right, and that's money that could have been spent for these. And with rural hospitals, I'd love to see when that article was written, because we really sat down, all of us, we got a lot of energy and commerce people here. I went to rural hospitals. It's urban hospitals. It's any hospital that has a high Medicaid population, which by typically also has a high Medicare population. So the low reimbursement rates for those programs affect those hospitals. That's what we're talking about here. And if you look at a item came up that a lot of, I didn't know as much about, state directed payments. We sat down and that's probably what they're writing about, because there were people saying that those should not stay where they are. And we sat down with hospitals. We all did. We looked and we said, yeah, this really ups the reimbursement for hospitals that have high Medicaid so they can stay open. So we held harmless that provision. Now going forward, there's reform in it, but it held harmless. State said that they had difficult times with their budgets, and the provider taxes helped them get through. You know, President Biden called them a scam. President Obama wanted to be 3.5. So a lot of people know this is sending money up to match federal money. But we said, okay, we realized it would be a big burden on states if we took a big approach to it. So we held harmless. We said, we're going to freeze where you are. You can increase, but we don't want rural hospitals on the edge closing because we took away state directed payments, because we lowered the provider taxes for states. And so if anybody's closing tomorrow because of this bill, then it means they were already going to be closing anyway, because this bill doesn't affect that. And then there were people that are eligible for Medicaid. So only ACA. So that was another one. So they said if you're on Medicaid and you fall off Medicaid, you can't go to the ACA. The ACA sets up the provision that if you have other coverage, you can't go on if you have other coverage. So if somebody has Medicaid, this is what our argument wasn't, save money, but if somebody has Medicaid and the only reason they become ineligible because they are able-bodied under all the exemptions that I read, but they're able-bodied and they fall off Medicaid just because they won't work, then they shouldn't have the opportunity to go get a subsidized plan in another form. And so that's what that provision was there for. So this whole committee, Energy, we're all saying we spent a lot of time making sure that we reform a program that's grown twice the size of inflation. I mean, one state has spent $26 billion more on Medicaid in the last 3 years. We felt it was unsustainable. We walled off. There's 2 groups. There's the Affordable Care Act. So if I'm a healthy Kentuckian and I go to the hospital, the federal government pays 90%. If I'm a disabled child in Kentucky, go to the hospital, the federal government pays 72%. Talk about values. But we have left that alone in our bill because of the states have budgeted and put their hospitals around that. So unfortunately, that's what was put into law under the Affordable Care Act. And so we looked at all of that. How do we get a handle on the growth in Medicaid and make it sustainable and protect it for mothers and pregnant women, mothers, children, the disabled, what the program was originally intended for, because most of the great growth is in the expansion population. And I think this proposal was well thought out. I received a letter from the Kentucky Hospital Association. I said saying that thank you for the path that you took, because this is something we can deal with. I sat with hospital executives when they listened to the rhetoric and they saw where I thought our plan was going, and I could say, look, this is where I think it's going. They would all say, wow, we can all live with this. So we've given a product that saves the program. It puts it on a more sustainable path. You know, it's still a growing program. It's going to spend over 1.1, we're going to spend 700 billion this year, 1.1 trillion 10 years from now after this bill's in full effect. So we're not cutting Medicaid. What we're trying to do is deploy the resources for the people that need it the most and reform the program and let states have to take more responsibility in the future, but hold them harmless today. So we don't have these hospitals on the edge, like my friend from Pennsylvania mentioned, on the edge, being affected by what we do here in the next few days.
So, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you. You did spend time with hospitals from my state, talking to them about what we were doing in this bill. I really appreciate the time that you took there with them and with many other members. Any member who had hospitals with questions, you took time to visit with, and we're grateful for that. I just want to make a few exclamation points on some of the things that you said. Medicaid alone is on pace to outpace defense spending. Medicaid alone is on pace to outpace defense spending.
As I
That's
said,
a,
we'll spend it's going up from 700 billion out of 1.1 trillion under this bill.
that is not sustainable. And Mr. Chairman, what happens to the Medicaid population when we can no longer afford that level of spending?
Well, it's the fear when the interest on the debt just gets so big, it overcomes it all. And so I said to hospitals, a lot of hospital CEOs that I've talked to, yours and others, and I said, look, this is a beginning to bend the cost curve. This will be a much different conversation when we get to the point that we can't borrow money anymore because our debt's too high.
And-
We need to have this conversation now because we can do things that's sustainable and can keep everybody operating. But we get to a point where we can't borrow anymore. It's a different conversation.
And we've been talking about safeguarding Medicaid for the people who need it most. You said it best. We are preventing the ineligible, the illegal, and the able from accessing benefits and taking dollars away from the very people who this program was designed to help. Pregnant women, children, the disabled, seniors. If we did nothing, would there be more or less money available to take care of the traditional population?
Well, if you think about it, if you're a state program and you get 90 cents, in my state, you get 72.90. So 90 cents for one patient and 72 cents for the other. The incentive is there. I don't think it was intentional. It was to get states to expand, but now the incentive is there to spend more, have more access and care for the higher reimbursement.
And finally, we are saving approximately $700 million in Medicaid over the 10-year window because of making sure people who are ineligible, illegal, and able are not accessing benefits designed for the people who
Well,
need
the
it
able
most.
access them if they work, but the
If
able
they
access-
work,
yeah, if
that's
they
right.
work.
But we're saving money, but we're still increasing spending in Medicaid. So when Democrats say we're slashing Medicaid, we're still increasing our overall spend in Medicaid over the window.
From
Is
about
that correct?
700 billion to 1.1 trillion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Langworthy.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. A lot's been said here today. I would like to offer the opportunity for Chairman Thompson from my neighboring district to offer, in similar fashion, anything that he would like to rebut based on what's been said here today.
Oh, I thank my neighbor to the north for yielding some time. I just want to start out by saying, contrary to the disparaging remarks we've endured today, based on fear, not facts, the goal is not to hurt those struggling in poverty. The goal is to fulfill the purpose that is in law of the nutrition title. In the nutrition title, as of the FRA, by the way, any of those who voted for the FRA were the ones that approved those benefits that we talked about for the homeless, those aging out of foster care and veterans. You that voted for that were the ones that voted to have those expire in 2030. There was a question during some of the questioning of where that came from. So, but within the FRA, we obviously food security has always been a part of the nutrition title. Really important. but it has a dual purpose. It is officially codified and in law, and that is workforce development. That became a part of that purpose. And I would say we also, not in law, but my own personal perspective is we need to achieve sustainability of this critical program and not to have cuts. And I've said all along, we've had that discussion in committee and I read too often about cuts that are happening and there are no cuts. The House Committee on Agriculture is leading efforts to restore integrity to the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The committee's reforms ensure that SNAP works the way that Congress intended it to, going back to the 1970s. We're really proud of that program. It has been a program that has restored rungs in a ladder of opportunity for folks to be able to pull themselves out of poverty while at the same time meeting their, providing supplemental nutritional assistance. And the goal is, and we do that in terms of the program integrity in areas by reinforcing work. Those who can work should. And there certainly are plenty of waivers and provisions so that to address, kids, the reason it went, that it's always been 6 years and younger as a waiver on the general work requirements is because it was recognized that if you had a preschool child at home, that you would have to be able to care for them. It also applies if you have someone in your house that is disabled, including maybe a parent that you have to provide care for. Always those exemptions are there. But by reinforcing work, rooting out waste, and instituting long overdue accountability incentives to control costs and end executive and state abuse and overreach. Because when the executive branch and specifically the states do things the wrong way, it is the SNAP participants, those individuals, those families are the ones that are hurt most. So the reason for this reform, it's intended to intent to supplement the food budget for low income individuals. That's what SNAP is. The SNAP has ballooned in cost. Since 2019, SNAP rolls have increased by 17%, from 36 million to in 2019 to 42 million. And a lot of that has occurred at the state level. And while the overall cost of the program has grown by 83%, ballooning from 60 billion to 110 billion annually, states do administer the program. They administer the program. There's a cost share for administration of the program, and the collectively, the states make $13 billion per year in erroneous payments, both overpayments and underpayments. And both of those hurt the beneficiaries, the people that we've been spending hours now talking about how do we help them. The national average error rate is 11.68%. That has nearly doubled just since 2019. So what is the impact? Obviously, we all know what the impact is when it's an underpayment. That single parent mom with 2 little babies the states are not providing sufficient assistance in putting money into their SNAP EBT card. And that's obvious how that hurts those families. But I will tell you that the overpayments, which there's more overpayments than underpayments based on the data, has even, I think, greater harm. If you're that single parent mom with 2 little babies and the card gets charged, you're going to use whatever's on that card. And that's fine, because that's the benefits you were given. And when you go, and by the way, SNAP beneficiaries use an average of 2 to 3 forms of payment when they go. They're not using just SNAP. That's obviously supplemental to cash and to checks or debit cards. So how does the overpayment hurt them? Well, because the states will come back and claw that back. It may be 3, 4, 6 months later. Now, where is that single parent mom with 2 little babies supposed to find that money at that point? That's where program integrity is so important. It one of the things it does, it protects the beneficiary. It protects that single mom from that. And so the error rate by these states is completely unacceptable. And you know what? Why do they do it? Because there's no skin in the game. They don't have there's no accountability. They get the money, they execute the program. And if they don't do it right, which is with these error rates is a significant amount, I believe, Pennsylvania doesn't do it right. It's double digits. And there's a lot of Pennsylvanians that are hurt because of these error rates. And that's unacceptable. States have to do a better job. So what we provide is, we could have come in and just done a punishment, but we did a carrot and a stick. And we put it at just 5% cost share. But it's based on their error rates. And I happen to believe that looking over the past couple decades, every state can get their error rate down below to be at that 5% mark. Only 28% of able-bodied adults without dependents on SNAP have earned income from work. That's largely because of not because of the law that in the regulations that Congress passes and the executive branch writes. It's because of how it's poorly administered by the states. The USDA and states have intentionally limited enforcement of the SNAP work requirement for adult without dependent children, able-bodied adults, through waivers, leaving 40% of these work-ready individuals today under a waiver of the ABOD work requirement, and remaining on the SNAP rolls long after the 3-month time limit for compliance with the work requirement. So because of the SNAP benefit, unlike other entitlement benefits, is 100% funded by the federal government, there is minimal, I would say no incentive for states to control costs, to enhance efficiency, and improve outcomes for recipients. The gentlelady showed the Medicaid paperwork. That is not paperwork that I don't believe comes from the federal government, because I know in the SNAP program, it is the states determine that bureaucracy. And there are problems with states that will take months in order to process those applications under the nutrition title. That's unacceptable, and that's why we need to hold states accountable. And I don't believe that no state out there is going to cut SNAP benefits. You heard about the passion for that assistance on both sides of the aisle and here. And so I think you're being pretty much unrealistic and disrespectful to our colleagues that work in state capitals to think that this program would be any less important to them. And we're talking 5% that I believe that they can all get there. So with that, I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Mr. Langworthy, would you yield a moment? I think, Mr. Thompson, you brought up a very significant word in your comments, and that's integrity. And what we keep hearing on our side is we want integrity in these programs to save them. But integrity, and we're hearing that these are moral programs. Well, integrity is moral too. And we want integrity in the programs so that we can save them. And I think you've just outlined that extremely well. And it's a word we have not heard enough of in this debate here, and I think probably in the committees, because we keep hearing about cuts when we're talking about having integrity in the programs. So thank you, Mr.
If the gentleman from New York will yield just a few minutes.
Certainly.
We did not roll back the daily amounts that these recipients receive. There was an increase when the market basket analysis was done at the direction of the 2018 Farm Bill. And again, I agree, it's only like $6 a day, something like that. That amount was not rolled back within this, nor did we are we preventing going forward adjustments based on inflation? Because that is the current law. And so I think those corrections are really important to make, and I thank the gentleman from New York for yielding.
And I yield back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Griffith, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You know, fake news, misinformation, it has long existed in human societies. And today we heard several folks reference Marie Antoinette and let them eat cake. She never uttered those words. As historians will tell you, there's no evidence that she ever said it. I understand the intent in which it was used, but she
If you-
never
if
said
you're
those
quoting
words.
me-
In
you're
fact,
misquoting me.
let me finish.
I just say you guys
The
make Marie
rumor-
Antoinette look like she's down to earth. That's
The-
what I said.
no,
Okay.
no, not going there. But the rumor that she said those words started circulating in the streets of Paris a couple of weeks after her head had been severed by the guillotine. And as everybody knows, the brain only functions for 2 seconds. Scientific data done at the guillotine by French scientists showed the brain only functions for 2 seconds, 2 blinks of the eye subsequent to the head being severed. Misinformation is still out there, and sometimes it's both sides of the aisle that just, we start these stories or these rumors in the minds of people. And one of those that all of us have been guilty of is talking about work requirements related to this bill, because it's actually community engagement. So if you're going to school, as we've heard some testimony today, if you're engaged in your community in any way, going to school, getting a drug treatment program, it counts. Volunteering in your community for that 18.47 hours a week counts, or 80 hours. It doesn't have to all be done in a week. 80 hours over the course of the 4.33 weeks in a month counts. And so I heard, because we fall into that trap, I heard that, well, how can you work when you need daycare? Well, you could be volunteering with the local daycare and count as community engagement. So we need to try to get the facts straight in this point in history, or else 200 years from now, they're going to be talking about work requirements when in fact it's community engagement. Just as we have heard today that Marie Antoinette said, let them eat cake, which she never did. Now, we have also heard other disparagements today, which are not accurate. The gentleman from Missouri threw shade on the Energy and Commerce Committee earlier by saying that it didn't have great jurisdiction. Now, having heard some of this, I'm sure his opinion has changed. And knowing that in order for him to make final comments, he will need to be recognized by a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, I'm sure his opinion has changed in the last few hours as we've been debating this. And I would now ask the gentleman from Missouri if he would like to correct any things that are misunderstood that have been said today, or that somehow otherwise need correction, so the historical record will be complete.
I want to thank the gentleman from Virginia for yielding, asking that question, and also for serving on a fairly decent committee. So I appreciate the work that you all have been doing. This bill is a bill for working Americans. I'm a product of the working class. Like I said earlier, I grew up most of my life in a single wide trailer, and then we upgraded to a double wide. My dad was one of those 199A employees that would benefit in this bill. He was the employee of one. He had a 2-car garage. He was the best transmission overhaul mechanic that you could find. And I was the first in my family to ever graduate college. They were the first in their family to ever graduate from high school. And so the community that I represent, my hometown where I live today, is less than 5,000 people. The per capita income is just at $24,000. $24,000 a year. My grandparents never had running water on the farm that I live on. I was the first one to drill a well, so we didn't have to use an outhouse. I understand the struggles of working Americans. And that's why for over the last year, Chair Fox, we have traveled throughout this country. We've had 15 different field hearings from a homeless shelter in Chicago to an Indian reservation in Arizona to the second largest port in Staten Island. We went all over this country to hear from real small business owners, real working moms, real farmers of the issues that they're facing in today's economy. And that's what this bill delivers on. This bill makes permanent what is expiring at the end of this year. Every individual tax rate will be made permanent. The 10% tax rate will be made permanent. Every single one. The child tax credit, which affects 40 million Americans, 40 million children. If Congress does not act by passing this legislation, you will see the child tax credit go from $2,000 to $1,000. To $1,000. That affects working families. The guaranteed deduction, which 91% of Americans use when they file their taxes, that gets slashed in half if we don't pass this bill. But guess what? This bill also increases that guaranteed deduction, $1,000 per individual. That's real tax relief for the 91% of Americans that use it to file their taxes. We also enhanced the child tax credit, $500, to make the child tax credit $2,500. Inflation's gone up a lot since 2017, and we're indexing it for inflation. We're also delivering on the promise that we made to the voters of no taxation on tips, no tax on overtime, tax relief for seniors, also allowing you to be able to deduct your interest from autos made in the United States. I'll tell you, the senior citizen who's an Uber driver is going to benefit the most from this tax package, because no tax on tips, senior tax relief, and also they can deduct their interest if that car is made in the United States. These are real impacts for real Americans. In fact, an average family of four under this tax bill will see their tax cuts of $1,300. $1,300. Where I come from, $1,300 is a lot of money in the paychecks of working families who are struggling just to get by. In this tax bill, what it does for small businesses, there's 26 million small businesses right now that are wondering, is their tax rate going to be 43.4% next year or 23 to 28%? And these are those mom and pops on Main Street that are just surviving. That's my parents' auto repair shop in Southeast Missouri. They're deciding of how to invest, how to grow right now with the uncertainty, and this bill will provide that certainty. In fact, we also enhance the small business deduction to 23%, allowing them to have more parity with the big corporations, with having a lower tax rate as a small business owner. We also go after special interest tax provisions that were passed in the IRA. We eliminate more than $500 billion of bad green scam policies. And those policies will be redirected for the working class Americans, those tipped employees, those linemen working overtime, those seniors who are living paycheck to paycheck. That's what we're going to do with those green credits. We're also going to hold elite universities accountable. We're going to make sure that they pay their share of revenues coming from endowments. Corporate tax rate's 21%. The top tax rate will be 21%. If an endowment can have $55 billion, more than most countries, I think that they're not really paying their fair share. We're always talking about paying their fair share. but we're going to make sure those elite universities pay their fair share. It's the same way with woke non-for-profits. We're holding them accountable. We're also saving $140 billion in the tax code to make sure illegals aren't benefiting from the tax code. And this is all to deliver real relief for the average, everyday American who sent us to Washington for this mandate. I appreciate you for allowing us to be here today.
Madam
It's
Chair, I
still
yield
your
back.
time.
I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Jack, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will engage Mr. Wahlberg. I appreciate your patience throughout this hearing. I can relate that it's a little lonely when you sit at the edge of the table, but would welcome any closing thoughts and comments from you and the incredible work that your committee members produced at the Education and Workforce Committee.
Well, Mr. Jack, I appreciate that. Bobby and I are feeling like Rodney Dangerfield down here at the end of, you know, I served on the Ag Committee, my first term in office. Great committee. Got a great Ag district that I represent. I served on Energy and Commerce up until I took the chairmanship of this fabulous committee. And I never wanted to serve on Ways and Means. It's not up to my standards yet. No, I love you, Jason. I love you. Just had to get that in. But I do appreciate that. Education workforce, I don't want to belabor this, but we did some amazing work, I believe. $350 billion of savings that will, I think, foster better opportunity for students in higher education at lower costs. In the Northwest Ordinance, it's probably included in some of your state's constitutions. It says religion, morality, knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. I don't think we've been encouraging education as we ought to. And for that reason, my ranking member, Scott, and I, and Representative Nagus, I'll respond to your question, which was a legitimate question. We started at 10:15 in the morning on our markup. 5.5 hours later, after 33 or 34 amendments that we debated together, we completed it. And I turned to Bobby and I said, Bobby, what happened? He said, what do you mean? I said, it's still light out. I think that shows how a committee can work together to get things done, whether we agree or not on everything, and we didn't. But I think the passion is there for education. So what we did in this bill, seeing that right now, 40% of master's degree programs and a quarter of bachelor's degree programs leave students worse off than if they'd never started in higher education because of the costs and the debt that they have. Within the next 10 years, if we don't do something, we have $300 billion of debt to the students that they're going to lose over the next 10 years. Taxpayers lose 20 cents on every dollar that they lend to post-secondary education right now. That's not a winning formula. So in our legislation, Mr. Jack, we attempted to reduce from 5 disparate loan programs, some without, well, most without any limit on them, down to 2. And we put reasonable caps in for undergrad, for grad, and for professional grad students. Why did we do that? To give incentive to colleges, universities, trade schools, community colleges, to live within their means, and ultimately we gave them something they've asked for many years, and now they have the opportunity to counsel their students on the basis of what their program will afford to them once they graduate, what they should take as a loan and no more. For that reason, we have a chance to give them skin in the game, that if students come out at the end of the pipeline and they are paying off their student loan, keeping on track to do that, and they have advanced in their ability to earn, we give them a special carrot called a promise grant. If they don't, and the students are defaulting and not achieving what they ought to achieve, then we give them a portion of risk sharing to contribute, that carrot and stick approach. Bobby and I agreed on a very significant portion of the bill, and that's workforce Pell, short-term Pell. We know our manufacturing entities, our trades need people in the jobs these days. And why not give them certification programs, apprenticeship programs, short-term degrees that we can use workforce Pell for, to bring them out of that pipeline with a skill, with a job, and without huge student loan debt. And Bobby and I are going to continue to work on other workforce programs to ramp up that deal, but we did get that into this bill as well. So I won't belabor the point, but that $350 billion of savings is all being put in to make it more accessible for students to come out of the end of the pipeline. We don't agree on all of that. I get that. But that's the approach, and I think in the end, we're going to see a better higher education system.
I wonder if the gentleman might give the ranking member a chance to.
Well, he already had a chance to
Well,
address one of your
you were
concerns,
speaking
but
a lot
yeah.
for him. I just heard a lot of references to Bobby.
Respectfully,
Mr. Magoo,
respectfully, Mr. Nagoose, I reclaim my time, and I appreciate your comments, Chairman Wahlberg, and obviously appreciated your testimony throughout this hearing, Mr. Scott. And with that, I yield back to our chairwoman, Ms. Fox.
Madam Chair, can I publicly thank Rules Republicans for all those profound last questions?
You just did.
Just did.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair.
Excuse me,
I'd
Mr.
like to,
Scott.
like to thank you and the gentleman from Colorado for your kind words about Jerry Connolly as the Dean of the Virginia delegation. Several people said very nice things, and I'd like to thank you for those.
I want to say, I think it's important we always acknowledge each other because we all work hard. And it's important that we do that, no matter the party. The next panel, thank you. I have an important announcement to make. To the members in the room who've been waiting patiently to deliver amendment testimony, I have a brief announcement about how we're going to proceed. Those of you who've been excused can go. We're going to begin with a leadership panel, but it will still be an amendment panel. Democrat leadership has asked to testify as a panel of 3 to begin with. But it's our understanding they will abide by the procedures of an amendment panel, meaning 5 minutes of testimony each. We will then move to calling up members to testify on amendments, 8 members at a time. We've been doing our best to monitor when members have arrived and are arriving. We're also doing our best to cross-reference our notes on this with the staff of our Democrat counterparts so we get it as right as possible. I'll be calling up the members 8 at a time. I've been patient this entire meeting and I ask for reciprocal patience here. If you just walked in, you may need to wait for a third panel. And for those listening who aren't here, you may need to wait for a fourth panel and so on. Again, I'm asking everyone to be patient. We'll be identifying the members for each panel verbally. I believe if you are on the Democrat side, and I think everyone who wants to offer an amendment is on the Democrat side, you may talk to the Democrat staff outside about where you might be in the queue. Mr. Jeffries, I understand you want to address the group in terms of the loss of Mr. Connolly first, and then I'll identify you for your testimony.
Madam Chair, thank you so much, and thank you so much for the moment of silence and the kind words of remembrance on behalf of our dear colleague, Jerry Conley, who really was a member's member, someone who conducted himself with the highest degree of intellect, brilliance, resilience, integrity, humor, and wit. It's a great loss for his family, great loss for his district, great loss for the Commonwealth of Virginia, great loss for us as House Democrats, but certainly a great loss for the Congress and for the country, given just the depth of his representation, the relationships that he had on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the Capitol, and the fierce representation that he provided to the people that he's been privileged to represent for decades. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some brief words of reflection on behalf of the House Democratic Caucus.
Well, I'm reminded of an old poem, "For Whom the Bell Tolls."
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Now, I'd like to recognize that we have Minority Leader Jeffries, Leader Clark, and part of the leadership, Mr. Aguilar, at the witness table for our first panel. So I now will recognize each of you. Will you be going first, Mr. Jeffries?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Thank you, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member McGovern, for the opportunity to testify at this incredibly important Rules Committee meeting. I also thank my colleagues, Whip Catherine Clark and Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar, for partnering with me on this amendment. Come before you today with an amendment to strike the unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American cuts to the healthcare and food assistance of the American people. America is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We are better than this. The great American middle-class dream is that when you work hard and play by the rules, you should have the ability to provide a comfortable life for yourself and for your family, a good paying job, educate your children, purchase a home, and have access to high quality and affordable health care, as well as be able to put food on your kitchen or dining room table. Unfortunately, we are here today discussing a bill that would make that American dream harder to reach for millions by increasing costs for families, hardworking American families, and gutting the things that they need to survive and thrive. This reckless budget would take health care and food assistance away from millions of people in order to provide tax cuts to the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. It would hurt children, hurt seniors, hurt families, hurt women, hurt people with disabilities, and hurt our nation's veterans. If enacted, the GOP tax scam would represent the largest cut to health care in American history and the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history in order to provide the largest tax breaks to billionaires like Elon Musk. in American history. So let's begin with the healthcare component of this amendment. Everyone should have access to high quality and affordable health care in the United States of America. In 1965, Congress created both Medicare and Medicaid. In the intervening decades, Congress passed legislation to expand and strengthen these important programs. In 2010, this Congress, under the leadership of Speaker Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi, passed the historic Affordable Care Act, which created new protections for people with pre-existing conditions and expanded health care for tens of millions of people who couldn't otherwise afford it. Since then, we have managed to achieve the lowest uninsured rate in history. Why would we go backward? Which is what the GOP tax scam would do. We know, however, that our healthcare system is not perfect. Too many Americans continue to be unable to pay their medical bills and struggle to get access to the care that they need. As Democrats, we are ready to work in a bipartisan manner to address these challenges, but we will never support any Republican effort to rip away health care from the American people. This GOP tax scam will force nearly 14 million people to lose their health coverage and cause millions more to pay higher copays, premiums, and deductibles. Hospitals will close, nursing homes will shut down, and people will die in all of your districts. Now, prior to the modern SNAP program being created in 1964, there was vast hunger and food insecurity across this country, including in low-income communities, rural areas, and communities of color. Thanks to public investigations, community-based organizations, and some good journalism, these challenges were spotlighted, and the need for an expansion of federal food assistance was highlighted. The American people were moved by images of children with distended bellies rummaging around in garbage and families going hungry. Finally compelled Congress to act. And over the last 60 years, we as a country have made significant progress to reduce hunger and help people afford nutritional food. Unfortunately, the policies in this GOP tax scam threaten to undo this progress and return us to an age where far too many children or veterans or seniors are struggling to eat and get access to the nutrition that they need. It's also important to recognize that SNAP is a vital part of providing opportunity for our farmers, who we stand with, food makers, small businesses, truckers, independent grocers, and the entire supply chain. So for the Republicans who have promised to love and cherish Medicaid, I ask you to support this amendment. For the Republicans who believe we should not rip food away from the mouths of children, seniors, and veterans, we ask you to support this amendment. And for the Republicans who believe that the gospel in Matthew 25 and 35 teaches us to stand up for the poor, the sick, the afflicted, the least, the lost, and the left behind, we ask you to support this amendment and strike these harmful cuts to health care and nutritional assistance. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the Ranking Member McGovern, the members of this committee. I'm a proud co-sponsor of Leader Jeffrey's amendment, and my Democratic colleagues have done an excellent job laying out how taking Medicaid and food from kids and seniors, veterans and moms to give tax cuts to billionaires while increasing our deficit is a triple threat to the American people. But unfortunately, it doesn't end there. I'm offering an additional amendment that strikes a provision that would defund Planned Parenthood. Speaker Johnson recently said about this provision, it is about going after, quote, big abortion. But he knows better than that. We all know the federal government doesn't pay for abortion care. We all know Republicans have already decimated access to safe abortions in this country. So what does this provision actually do? It further defunds women's health care. It defunds cancer screenings, prenatal care, postpartum services, fertility treatments, preventative care. 96% of Planned Parenthood's clinical work has nothing to do with abortion, but everything to do with serving millions of women, most of them overwhelmingly in rural and underserved areas, who are having a hard time finding reproductive care or any health care, especially in states with abortion bans. Faced with the choice of either breaking the law or breaking their oath to put patients first, OBGYNs are packing up and leaving. As a result, 35% of counties in America don't have a single obstetrician. In Georgia, it's 42%. In Texas, it's 50%. Clinics are shutting down while maternal mortality is on the rise. Infant mortality is up for the first time in decades. How does this bill respond to this Republican manufactured crisis? It piles on. It makes it even harder for women to find health care. Without this amendment, it would shut down nearly 600 health centers run by Planned Parenthood, 64% of which serve women living in medical deserts. These are communities that don't have enough healthcare providers as it is. These are women who overwhelmingly live in rural areas. These are women that you represent. If Planned Parenthood is defunded, 7,500 South Carolinians will lose their doctor. All of them, 100%, live in a medical desert. 9,200 Georgians are on the edge of that same cliff, 75% in medical deserts. 22,000 Hoosiers, 82% medical deserts. 24,000 Virginians, 50%. 37,000 North Carolinians, 67%. 51,000 Minnesotans, 69%. And 118,000 Texans. Count on Planned Parenthood in a state where babies and pregnant women are dying at a historic rate. 2/3 of Texans live in medical deserts, and 141,000 New Yorkers are about to see 47 clinics boarded up, 61% of them in the neediest areas in New York State. Millions of women are counting on their representatives to make the right decision. Women like Cheryl from North Carolina, who years ago was overdue for a pap smear, but she didn't have insurance and she kept putting it off. A friend mentioned Planned Parenthood would provide this free of charge. She booked an appointment, got checked, and it came back abnormal. They caught it early and the cancer was removed. Cheryl credits Planned Parenthood with saving her life. A lot of stories begin like Cheryl's. They should all end in the same way, with health care that saves lives. I hope this amendment gives you all pause. When the women in this country deserve health care, and I hope you will think about the moms struggling to get by and stay healthy for the sake of their children and their families. It is not too late. Do right by them. Make this amendment in order for floor consideration. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ranking Member McGovern, distinguished colleagues on the committee. I appreciate your kind words about our colleague, Mr. Connolly, as well, Madam Chair. I'm grateful for the opportunity to introduce amendments that would strengthen SNAP, a program that helps families across the country meet their basic needs. I'm also proud to co-sponsor Leader Jeffries' amendment. State governments can't afford to take on the extra costs that this legislation would impose on them. It would force leaders in red states and blue states to either raise taxes or remove people from SNAP, leaving even more Americans hungrier and poorer. I wish more Americans had the opportunity to hear from our prior panel's testimony during the workday, but this committee made the choice to hide from the public and keep hidden what's actually in this bill. In fact, we're still told that managers' amendments are still being negotiated and are incomplete. It is outrageous that this committee is debating these policies under the cover of darkness, but it shouldn't be surprising. Legislation you intend to pass, started at some ungodly hour, kicks millions of Americans off their health insurance and takes away food assistance for families who need it most. As grocery prices rise, I cannot understand why my Republican colleagues want to take food out of the mouths of mothers, children, and veterans while making healthcare even more expensive. House Democrats are eager to take on waste, fraud, and abuse throughout the federal government, but we cannot find a willing partner on the other side of the aisle because of our colleagues' single-minded focus on cutting healthcare for people who need it most. This legislation doesn't make Medicaid or SNAP more efficient or more fair, Madam Chair. All this bill does is ensure that billionaires who have never had to worry about a hospital bill or putting food on the table can continue to pay less in taxes than a teacher, a firefighter, or a nurse. Madam Chair, it is a fact that only House Democrats want to make healthcare more accessible and more affordable for everyone. We will continue to fight back against this effort to drive up costs of health insurance and end basic needs programs just to make a group of campaign donors happy. The contrast is clear. House Republicans are making healthcare more expensive and less accessible. House Democrats want to ensure that every American can earn the peace of mind of a good paying job with great benefits. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Aguilar, would you mind leaving your testimony with me? Because I don't believe I heard a couple of things that you said, and I just want to look at it before I make any comments.
Of course.
Okay, I want to double check that I heard some things that I think you said
Okay,
before I make any comments.
of course.
I'm going to recognize, before I speak, I'm going to recognize any of my colleagues. Ms. Houchin, Mr. Langworthy, Mr. Scott, you recognize.
Madam Chair, I would just like to ask unanimous consent to submit for the record an article entitled Rich State Poor People. And if I might,
Without objection.
if I might just read from it, the oil and gas boom is helping New Mexico has become the nation's second biggest oil producing state. Taxes paid on the state's oil production will generate, and in quotations, more money than we know what to do with, according to Democrat State Senator and Legislative Finance Committee Chair George Munoz. States are flush with cash that are well. Thank you.
Without objection. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Yeah. First of all, let me just address something that Chairman Smith said. He went through all the things in the tax section of the reconciliation bill that, quite frankly, most of us support. I mean, the child tax credit, the no tax on tips, the middle class tax cuts. But what he omitted with the tax cuts for billionaires, what he omitted were the cuts to Medicaid that will throw people off of healthcare, or the cuts to SNAP. Leader Jeffries, we're reasonable. We're happy to work with them, but there's no way in hell we're going to support a bill that's going to throw 14 million people off of healthcare, or throw millions of people off of SNAP. Maybe you can maybe comment on how would children, how would seniors be impacted by the legislation that is before us?
Well, thank you, Mr. McGovern. You know, this legislation would rip healthcare away from approximately 14 million Americans, including millions of children who will be adversely impacted by the fact that Medicaid is being cut in the greatest numbers in American history, children who would otherwise be able to see a doctor when they're sick, but might not be able to as a result of Medicaid being ripped away. Children who will no longer have